on light use, it will last a couple days. Like you can not go without charging a couple days. And then on heavy use, you can even, it'll go, you can forget to charge overnight and still get through most of the next day. And then, have to get it on a charger. But, we're talking, I think, pretty solid day and a half kind of battery, which matters if, you're on like a long flight, things like that, where you're not going to have decent battery. You're not, tethered to a portable charger as much, because, this thing can conserve pretty well. Like I said, especially in a non, usage mode. So if you're on a long flight, you put it in airplane mode, you're not really using it much, maybe playing music or something. You're not going to have much of a hit on your battery at all, even over, 8-10 hours kind of thing. So good stuff.
Jason Hiner, TechRepublic, you've been living with the S9 now for a couple weeks, as have I, and I hadn't thought about this because it's one of those things that when you get great battery life, it's not top of mind. You just end up using the device a lot more. So what are your main takeaways after using the device for a couple weeks, especially with the functionality that great battery life brings?
Yeah, so it's one of the features people aren't talking about much, right? You and I have talked a lot about the S9. Great camera. It's got some AI, and so the camera now has its own processor. Can do really cool things like the 960 frames per second, super slow mo. Can do some low light photography, which CNET has tested and had a little bit of mixed results in it, but it's on the way there. And the DeX, of course, we've talked a lot about that capability. This is now a desktop class processor in this kind of device. But the thing that people aren't talking about that much, that I think of, especially because I use these devices for business, and a lot of our readers are professionals that are using these devices, and so it matters a lot, is battery life. So on the surface, the S9 and the S9 Plus have exactly the same battery as the S8 and the S8 Plus. 3,000 milliamp hours on the S8 and the S9, and then 3,500 on the S8 Plus and the S9 Plus. So it looks exactly the same. However, with the Snapdragon 845 processor, as well as Samsung's own Exynos processor, which it uses in some models of these phones, both of which, by the way, are actually made by Samsung, both of those processors, which is it's a 10 nanometer process. It's a 64-bit processor, similar to last year, but it's a much faster processor, and it's also a far more efficient processor. So really a lot of this is down to that, as well as down to some of the software things that Samsung has done. You'll get little alerts on this device that say, hey, there was an app in the background that was using up a bunch of power, and we just shut it down, and here's what it is, and it'll list it for you. And so there's some software that's doing some things that, if there's apps running that are, draining your battery, it just shuts them off. And then it gives you an alert and lets you know. And then there's times when it'll alert you and say, hey, this thing's running in the background. You want us to shut it off? And you might be uploading a video. You might be, running a process, and you can tell it, no, don't. But otherwise, it's doing some better software management as well. So the combination of those two things, a better processor and sort of better software that's managing it, has produced some pretty tangible results. So I've had this experience. You've had some similar experiences where with light use, this thing can go a couple days without having to charge it, which you really don't see in a high-end phone like this, where you can not charge it for a couple days if you're just doing some kind of light use with it, and not and still have 50% battery life, or at least a usable amount of battery life left. Now with heavy use, it'll go a day and a half, so you can forget to charge overnight. Wake up, you might still have 40-50% battery life, sometimes a little more. And, you can still get through a bunch of the day until you get to a charger or a charging pack and that kind of thing. So the combination of those two things make this device just far, far more usable. Kind of like what you're saying, Dan, is, you don't really think about it. You just are using the phone. And, but you really notice these devices when they're running out of battery power quickly and you're having to charge them all the time.
Yeah, I have had two experiences that are particularly useful, or particularly in the biz tech, what I might be doing during my workday or productivity oriented. And that is using the secure enclave and using that super slow-mo camera. Now, I'm kind of joking a little bit about the super slow-mo camera. That might be in particular use cases, but let me tell you, I use that far more than I use the iOS slow-mo, and I use it to capture things that, hey, I might want to watch that back and see how each frame develops and really pay particular attention to segments of video. And as media becomes more important to every company, that's a more useful tool than I anticipated. And of course, that secure enclave, I kind of live inside of that. And in previous devices, that's sometimes the thing that I will notice a little bit of drain on the battery life. And with the S9, Jason, you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes I forget. I have the old Nokia experience. I forget when I charged the device last, and I take a look at it and say, it's doing just fine. I'll just take it.
Yeah, it's one of the things, these devices aren't that different, right? This device is not that different from the S8. But if you're somebody that really struggles with battery life, or is a heavy user, and you have some issues with battery life, or I know some people that have had the S7 Edge, great phone, not quite as solid on battery life. And, they've asked me about this device, and I said, look, if you care about battery life, that's if you're a professional, that's one of the best reasons to get this device. And I know a couple of people that have actually made the call and said, okay, yeah, that's one of my biggest pain points with this. And so I think you'll see others that find that that's a good reason to upgrade.
Yeah, so Jason, I know we have a full review coming on TechRepublic. What can we look forward to in some of those posts and videos about not just the phone itself, but features like the battery, the camera, and other things business technology professionals not just need, but require?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about more about DeX and DeX Pad. We're going to talk about the camera, show some examples of photos that we've taken, including photos I took with the camera in Barcelona following the launch event there, as well as the following week I was in Israel doing a tour there on AI and robotics. I took some photos with the S9 there, S9 Plus there as well. We're going to talk about what it can do and how this phone, the nice thing about this phone, the sort of watershed moment with this phone, especially at MWC, was this really is the first phone with a desktop class processor in it. Now you can say, to a degree, you had this with the Note 8, you had this with the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 8 Plus last year as well. It was a step in this direction. But with DexPad, you're really seeing this as a phone that is as powerful as your computer. And then with 5G, the other big story of MWC, next year you're going to get a phone that's going to have the S10 that's going to have 5G in it. And all of a sudden you're going to have a device that is now as fast as the fastest connection that you can get on a desktop computer today. And a desktop computer, if you have Google Fiber, if you have a super fast connection at work, anything. So we really are at the stage where these devices are not only, the center of our lives, the center of our data, the center of our productivity in some cases, but they are also moving to where they are as powerful and as fast as your average computer.